A major development in the war in Gaza. Hamas now approving a ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar.
There has been a deal on the table, a proposal on the table that would achieve an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages.
Israel's war cabinet is sending representative to Cairo to discuss the peace deal, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it's far from their demands. Earlier today, Israel ordered Palestinians in eastern Rafah to evacuate immediately, warning that the offensive could be coming. Joining us now is Javed Ali, a national security expert and associate professor of practice at the University of Michigan's School of Public Policy. Thank you for being here with us.
Terrence, always good to be with you.
So the potential of a ceasefire is something that a lot of people have been wanting to hear for a long time. How are you feeling about these latest developments?
So as you mentioned, there has been dialogue for months now in different locations around the world about the potential for a ceasefire. And based on some of the media reporting today and you showed the clip from Matt Miller from the State Department, there apparently has been a deal worked out, or proposal for a deal worked out between the governments of Qatar and Egypt and Hamas, apparently, or at least some aspect of the Hamas leadership, probably based in Qatar, has agreed to it. But it doesn't look like the Israeli government has agreed to it, because obviously it also looks like there are elements of their next round of their campaign in the Gaza Strip in southern Gaza and Rafah that's starting. Are parts of Hamas that are still in the Gaza Strip, these remaining fighting battalions and the leadership of the military wing of Hamas and people like Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Deif, have they agreed to these terms as well? So there's so many complicating factors here that it's really difficult to know whether we're going to see a deal or not.
Yeah, a lot of different factors at play here. Does this one seem any more real than any of the conversations that we've heard of in the past?
Well, I think in good faith, there have been these different efforts to put different deals on the table, but Israel's demands still seem pretty um, sort of clear from Prime Minister Netanyahu's perspective. Return of the hostages, destruction of the terrorist infrastructure that Hamas has used to conduct attacks both before October 7th and then October 7th, and a post October 7th world where Hamas is no longer in charge of the administration of the Gaza Strip. So unless all of those aspects of a deal are met, then I think it would be very difficult for Prime Minister Netanyahu to, based on his governing coalition, to accept anything that falls short of that. So there are a lot of domestic pressures on Prime Minister Netanyahu as well. And then on the flip side, there are a lot of things that are uh, critical here for the U.S. to also kind of sign up to this deal, because the U.S. is going to be an important player in a post October 7th world, or whenever the military campaign ends. So, and we've already seen, the effects of the protests here inside the United States and the votes here in Michigan that were uncommitted against President Biden. So there's a lot at stake for a ceasefire as well here in the United States.
Yeah, and in mentioning the U.S., if we were to see this deal carried out, what kind of role would America play in that?
I don't believe that the American role would be sort of enforcing the terms of a ceasefire on the ground with some kind of military presence, either operating under the U.S. flag or the UN flag. I don't see either of those scenarios being um, likely at all, especially based in a campaign year, and President Biden is, for the most part, hinted that. So I think if there is a ceasefire, the role will be on the diplomatic side, on the intelligence side, to put the mechanisms in place to ensure that Hamas is abiding by the terms of that deal and providing whatever kind of diplomatic and intelligence support Israel would need to also make sure that Hamas is, or what's left of Hamas is abiding by those deals. But I just don't, and then financial support and then the humanitarian aid as well. And the U.S. has tried to step up on that. But the one instrument of national power from the military side, with boots on the ground and trying to play a peacekeeping role, I just don't see that being an option.
Sure. Of course, calls for peace and just for a permanent ceasefire. If only it could be that simple, though. If we were to see those kinds of conversations being had, what sorts of things would need to be at play?
So if all the different parties to this conflict can agree to a permanent ceasefire, going back to the Israeli positions, it would have to be return of all the hostages. It would have to be some pledge by what remains of Hamas to either not govern the Gaza Strip anymore or to no longer try to conduct operations against Israel. That would, I think, be a very, very difficult thing to achieve. Would the leadership of Hamas, or at least the military wing of the leadership, would they have to surrender to Israeli forces to face some kind of criminal trial or some kind of penalties that way? That could be another aspect to it. But I think those are all the things from the Israel side. And on the international community side, there would have to be pledges by Israel to make sure that there is a credible plan to rebuild the Gaza Strip once the fighting ends, that the humanitarian aid that has not yet gotten into the Gaza Strip, or the acceleration of that, can go in to really relieve the burdens that people have been suffering for all these months. So that has to be another important aspect of it as well.
And lastly, what do you think could be happening in the next few days, just realistically?
Well, it looks like already that there have been some limited Israeli military operations in Rafah, and it appears that they are trying to target the remaining battalions or fighting units of Hamas that are still embedded in Rafah, likely underground, not above ground, and maybe going after the leadership of the military wing of Hamas that's also likely still there. So we could see operations focused on those objectives. But given the sheer number of Palestinian civilians who have now taken refuge in southern Gaza, and that's at least over 1 million people, even these more tailored or precise operations, there's still going to be a high, and this is really unfortunate and tragic, there's still going to be a high risk of harm to those civilians just based on the physics of where they are in this really compressed space in which the IDF is now trying to operate. And maybe that's part of the Israeli campaign to get Hamas to finally accept the terms of a deal that's acceptable to Israel, is to put that kind of military pressure on them. But if these operations are going to continue over the next few days, unfortunately, I do think we're going to see scenes of additional civilian casualties as well.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Of course, we are hoping for the best. Javed, thank you for helping us unpack all of this. We'll be watching it closely.
All right. Thank you, Terrence.